just do the intro now. I'm ready to speak.
I'm ready to speak.
I've got like my proper upright posture going now. You know, my diaphragm is nice and clear.
Well, welcome to the Weeb Crew. We're back again. I'm Mumi. You already know this is Sai.
It's funny that you say we're back again because this is being recorded only like, for people listening, this is like 2 weeks later, but for us, we literally just recorded the last episode like 2 days ago. So,
well, it works for us because like we don't have to. It gives us more time to work on it.
This is true.
But today we got a special guest, Ari from the channel That Kodocha Girl.
Hi, it's nice to be here. I'm really excited to chit-chat with you all about Kodocha or 90s anime or whatever the heck you want to talk about with me.
I saw the notes Moon was writing down. We can talk about some stuff beyond just, Kodocha, even beyond anime. It looks like you got like Majora's Mask notes in here and stuff.
Oh, yes. Oh my gosh, yes.
Yeah, I do deep dives.
Spoilers for the podcast that you're listening to right now.
But just kind of start off with kind of introduce, I guess, your channel and what you do, and then if you want to kind of get into like maybe how you kind of started the channel, that might be a good way to transition into it. Yeah,
absolutely. So I found Kodocha in 2016. I know I was late to the party, as it's an anime from 1996, but you know, the moment I watched it and finished it, it captivated me in a way that no other anime has. You know, with its romance and just its comedy was so unique compared to anything I'd ever seen in anime before, especially given the nature of some of the topics in the show. You know, they can get pretty heavy at times. So when I finally, my mom gave me her old laptop computer that had a lot of video editing software on it. For a while I'd always had a passion for video editing. I just never really had the time or the decent software to do it. I used to do it all the time when I was growing up, messing around on my mom's computer. So I noticed that there was a lack of Kodocha content, especially on YouTube. And I'm not really a short format video person. TikTok's been kind of on the rise in the last few years, and I started one myself, but it's not the main medium that I think of when I want to create something to put out in the world. Sure. So I thought that, okay, well, I want to do a YouTube channel where I talk about this anime because I don't really see anybody talking about it like in video essay format. And I have a lot of ideas and theories and just interesting things to talk about related to the series. And it would be unique because I just don't see it. And it's the kind of content that I would watch that I'm not seeing. So I was like, okay, well, I'll just make it myself. So part of the process for me is now, when I went to college, I studied psychology, and it's another passion of mine. So I try to implement that in a lot of my videos as well. So I try to, especially in my video series that I'm working on about Sana and Nikito's relationship from Kodocha, I try to apply some of the stuff that's happening to psychological theories. So, for example, in my last part of that video series, I discussed the 5 love languages in relation to the characters of Kodocha in that particular volume.
Yeah, I actually watched those. I know you started citing Erik Erikson's 8 stages of psychosocial development in the first part. Mm-hmm. Is that something that you're doing kind of as you're watching the show, or is that something you kind of look more into after you've already been invested and kind of absorbed the show on your first watch?
Definitely after I absorb it, because I don't really, it's hard to explain. I don't really go into watching something with a mindset oh, I'm going to make a video on this, or, I don't really have that I just go into it wanting to be entertained, basically. And a lot of the stuff that you're seeing on my channel has been ideas that have been rolling around in my brain for years. And it just kind of all clicked with me because at the time I watched Kodocha, I was in college studying all of this. So it all kind of just blended together and then kind of stayed there in my head. And it was just like, okay, it's staying in here in my head for years and years. I need to get it out somehow.
Yeah, definitely, like, that seems to be the kind of theme, I guess, with a lot of people. Like, it seems like a lot of people just kind of want to watch something and just like passively kind of consume it and then look more deep into it, like after they've already enjoyed it. And they're like, I guess they've kind of passed that threshold of like, oh, this is something that's actually good that I enjoyed, so maybe then I'll look into it. And I feel like I just take such a, like, for me, it's such like a more active process where it's like once the show kind of invites like that level of kind of critique or criticism, then I start thinking about it while I'm watching the show. I think I said in was it the last episode? I don't remember. Like the way that we talk about in our videos, like when we're talking about the show, we do a little bit more research than, before we watch the show. Like we'll look into staff and stuff, but like that's generally conversations we're actually having as the show's kind of airing.
Mm-hmm.
That's just like, I guess, the level we engage with it on. So it's always interesting to kind of see like if people are doing that as they're watching the show or if that's something that they're doing like afterwards or like how they kind of consume the show.
Well, it's funny because, when we finish watching something, we'll then usually go on to YouTube and like try and like look for, okay, well, what are other people saying about the show? We look for videos, reviews, analyses, stuff like that. And usually we don't come up with much, especially if it's like an older, lesser known series. When we did that with Kodocha, we were like, oh, there's an entire channel dedicated to this. Holy crap. And I think is that how we found that Kodocha girl? Is that how we found this channel?
That was when did we group watch that? It was like a year and a half ago.
God,
so
something along those lines.
More toward the beginning of your channel, but not quite the beginning.
Yeah, very, very appreciative that like someone has like spent so much time talking. And it's interesting too, because I mean, obviously there are YouTube channels talking all about One Piece, Dragon Ball, these big like shonen properties that are all fairly long. But you don't really have a lot of channels that are dedicated to, I mean, Kodocha is still a long series. It's like over 100 episodes, but you don't have a lot of channels dedicated to just talking about one piece of again, now fairly like lesser known, more obscure shoujo series.
Mm-hmm. And the channels that I do see, if they are talking about that, it's usually like, oh, it's a shoujo channel or it's just a general anime channel.
Yeah, it's interesting because that used to be kind of more the norm, right? Like, I feel like, oh gosh, what year is this? 15, 20 years ago, it would have been more common for people to just be kind of more absorbed in like a singular show like that, where like you would have communities that were based solely. I mean, you still get that to a degree, I guess, with like Attack on Titan communities,
Attack on Titan, like, JoJo, stuff like
Hero
that.
Academia, stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like back then you would get that for, stuff that wasn't necessarily like the most popular. Like back then, Fruits Basket like probably had that kind of same experience, even though wouldn't say. I mean, Fruits Basket was certainly popular, but it wasn't like on the level of Full Metal Alchemist back in like 2004 or 5, whatever it was.
I've come across a few Fruits Basket. I wouldn't say they're channels, but there's a lot of Fruits Basket content being made on channels where they primarily talk about shoujo. That one's definitely like, it's just kind of just totally exploded in popularity in the last couple of years.
Yeah,
Fruits Basket and Chihayafuru, I think, are like the two really big ones right now. And I mean, Fruits Basket and Chihayafuru's ended too, right?
It did end more recent. The manga did, yeah.
Okay.
Fruits Basket's been ended for, over a decade, I think now.
Well, yeah, but the anime just ended like a couple of years ago.
Yeah, the remake of the anime.
That
definitely helped with its popularity.
Yeah.
Really good show, by the way. That's all I have to say. people talk about that show all the time, so I didn't really have anything new to add, but I really liked it. I actually watched it for the first time back in January this year, and I really enjoyed it.
Did you watch it dubbed or subbed? I
watched the dub.
Okay, so it's interesting because there's a Kodocha connection there because both Toro and Sana are both voiced by Laura Bailey.
Mm-hmm. And Kyo is voiced by Jerry Jewell, who also does Aikido.
Yeah. So interesting sorts of crossovers there.
They brought them back for the dub of the New Fruits Basket, didn't they?
Yeah, they did. That was like a big thing for a lot of people. It's like, oh, they brought back the original, kind of like Scott Pilgrim coming up. It's like, oh, they brought back the original cast, especially because people like Laura Bailey. Like I was actually surprised because we watched Kodocha dubbed, and I was like familiar with like Laura Bailey for doing stuff like she's like Lust and Full Metal Alchemist. She's like Jaina Proudmoore in World of Warcraft. More serious kind of roles. And I remember like she was also the brunt of a lot of criticism when like The Last of Us Part 2 came out. Mm-hmm. She voiced that one character that everyone hated for, I don't know, I haven't played the game. I don't know the reasons. But I remember specifically seeing like people being like, she's not a very good voice actress. She doesn't have a lot of range or whatever. And I'm like watching Kodocha and I'm just thinking to myself, wow, these people really have no idea what the hell they're talking about.
Yeah, I think it might have been just, all the hate, and some people like to latch onto that no matter what. And they don't look into things.
And people also just like hate on anime dubs, but I really like the dub for Kodocha.
Yeah, it's really good.
Yeah, it's probably the only time you're gonna like hear Laura Bailey doing a rap. It's such a surreal kind of thing, I guess. I don't know. I don't really have anything like against dubs generally. It's just I think it's more the issue is like with the process than the actual like performers. Mm-hmm. I don't think people really give like enough like grace and like credit to like the performers in the process because they don't really look into like how the dubs are actually done.
Right.
They're not giving it as much. They're not giving as much like room to work with as like the Japanese dubs usually are.
Especially because you have to do stuff like match like lip sync and all those things, which can be very constraining both in terms of like your delivery and like how you're like translating the dialogue itself.
You have that, and then you also have the fact that like dubs are made for much lower like margins than like the original anime dub, like the Japanese.
Yeah.
So they don't really have the money to sink into the production side of syncing the voices, and they're also not dubbing it alongside the animation process like they do in Japan. So it's they also don't have like the industry built up that Japan does because they're having to dub stuff like Pixar movies in Hollywood and Disney film, like stuff like that, where we're not having to do that. So there's just a lot of factors that go into a dub that people just don't get, like they always just jump to like, oh, this actor's bad. And it's like, no, it's not necessarily the case.
Would you guys say that you prefer the dub of Kodocha to the sub?
I prefer the dub. I typically prefer dubs. I don't always. I'm trying to think of an example of a show that I prefer the sub. I would say I prefer the sub of When They Cry. If you all have ever seen that show.
I've been playing the visual novel for the better part of a year now. I'm almost done. I'm in like the 7th arc. It's so goddamn long.
So you should really just watch the anime. Too. You'd be done by now.
Yeah, but I don't know. I feel like the anime is just going to cut out so much of what I've liked in the visual novel.
Possibly.
What about you, Mumi? What do you prefer, dub or sub for Kodocha?
I was surprised that I preferred the dub over the sub. Because like usually we watch dubs of stuff. I'm usually like, oh my god, this is fucking like graining to me. And there's an element of that to Kodocha, but I feel like it works for like what the tone of Kodocha is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Like her being like this hyperactive kid, it just kind of works to me. I was like, oh yeah, this is good. And then like because you only have the dub for the first 50 episodes.
Yeah.
And so then you have to switch to the sub. And then when it switched to the sub, it was so like jarring to me. I'm like, these aren't bad performances, but I feel like I prefer.
It took some. I need to like readjust my brain to be like, oh yeah, these are still the same characters. It was interesting.
I totally felt the same way when it actually took me a while to really sit down and watch the subs because of that. And also it didn't help that for a while we didn't have proper subs for it. Up until recently, actually, when Discotek Media released it on Blu-ray, and the subs like were actually good. Because the subs before were like, you could tell that, you know, the translation was a bit off. The sentence structure was awkward at times, and it was hard to get through. But thanks to Discotek Media, they made it a lot more watchable. So I definitely suggest, like, if you want to give the second season a chance, definitely check out their Blu-ray because it's fantastic.
Now we're just sponsored by Discotek.
Sponsored by Discotek.
Let's
you
go.
can cut that out, but I'm just such a big Kodocha fan. I'm just eternally grateful to them for that. So I am not affiliated with Discotek in any way.
The one thing I will say is that it's a like standard definition on Blu-ray release, so it's like it's only a couple discs. But what I would love to see, if it were ever possible, would to just be like a proper HD remaster of the show itself. If the original film negatives exist, that would be really cool. Because I really love the overall visual aesthetic of Kodocha.
Mm-hmm.
And to a certain extent, I think that's also lended by the fact that it is standard definition, and there is a sort of, it's almost like vinyl, you know, you kind of want that almost like a lower quality look to it. But I think maybe even being able to see it in HD at some point in the future would be really cool as well.
Mm-hmm.
So you talked about going to school for like psychology and stuff. I know you kind of mentioned both in your video and you kind of mentioned in chat, like you kind of were really into music, and in your Majora's Mask video, you kind of were saying that was something you were pursuing professionally at a point. And you were wanting to incorporate that a little bit more into like your videos and stuff?
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's difficult because I did music professionally in my hometown when I was a teenager, going into my early 20s, and then I stopped and I went to college, and then I kind of just started really getting back into it within the last few years. And I'm not really sure how I want to incorporate that in my channel. I did do a cover of one of the songs from Series 2 of Kodocha recently, and that went over really well. So I was really happy. I was really nervous when I posted that. But other than that, really the only thing that I could come up with is doing like covers of like songs featured in anime. I have a few recordings that I'm thinking of sharing soon where I did, they're not a cappella, but they're my own versions of songs from the Legend of Zelda series that I do like vocals over, and then I add just kind of some light instruments on GarageBand. So you guys might be hearing that sometime soon. I don't know. I don't know how I'm gonna go about that, as you know, it doesn't really fit the theme of my channel.
Have you actually like used your musical background in like any kind of like analysis, or do you just kind of, is it just something that you kind of appreciate on a different level, but you're not actually using that to like dissect anything? Like just like as an example, like people who might be really into ballet or something might get into something like Princess Tutu, in which like there's like this kind of meta layer from the music. I've
never really combined my love for music with that stuff, so that's another thing that's like I'm not really sure how to incorporate that, other than like, oh well, I'll just do a cover of, you know, this anime song I like. But you know, anyone who does like musical analysis is just like, anytime I watch videos about that, it blows my mind. Especially, you know, it's no secret. that, you know, if you followed me or looked at my channel, like The Legend of Zelda is like, it's like the gaming version of Kodocha for me. It's like I know a lot about it. It's my favorite series, and like I've seen like videos where they break down the music from that series and like what it could mean, you know, and how the song is structured and why it's structured the way it is, and it's like it's mind blowing, and it's fun to watch those because it kind of adds another layer to the stories within those games that makes it even more fantastic.
I guess that kind of brings up, since you said that like Kodocha is like Zelda to you, you mentioned in like the Majora's Mask video that you kind of gained a greater appreciation for Majora's Mask directly because of like, you know, fuck, what's the word? Experiences that you had in your life, brain work. Do you feel like that you enjoy media? Because I think Kodocha is kind of similar in that way, where, you know, Majora's Mask, Ocarina of Time, Kodocha, like they're all very kind of geared toward like children on like a surface level, but there's a lot that kind of goes behind them where you can appreciate more as like when you revisit them as an adult, right? Do you feel like that's a common kind of thing in what you appreciate with media, or is that just kind of like more something that you've pointed to with your favorites?
That's very interesting that you made that observation, because it's funny because my husband's made a similar observation with me. But it's interesting because there's just something about, and I guess on some level it's almost projection, I guess. Because I think on some level we all are drawn to certain media that resonates with us on a personal level. And,
Sure.
you know, as a child who like was kind of, you know, wanting to be a child, but kind of surrounded by a lot of darkness, I feel like I really appreciate things that are made for children, but they kind of dig a bit deeper and they explore things, you know, they explore hidden traumas, or they explore ideas that might be a bit too abstract for a child to understand at that moment. But then when you look back, you're like, oh, that makes sense as to why, you know, this was happening and how it affected me. And I guess that's why I went into psychology, because that was just always something that was really fascinating to me. And I love how it's expressed in media as well. Another example, which you might have seen it on my channel, is I did a video on a little video game that not a lot of people know of called Klonoa 2 Lunatea's Veil. And that game has a similar theme to it. It's media made for children. You know, I think the game is like rated E. It's obviously, you know, it's kind of got a Sonic the Hedgehog-y, cartoony look to it. But the story, you know, when I first played it as a kid, you know, it's just some goofy little platformer with some character that at the time I thought was like a ripoff of Tails. But, you know, the story, it goes so deep, so much deeper than at the beginning, because you think at the beginning it's just about, you know, helping this girl become a priestess, and you think it's about saving the world, but then you find out that there's like this hidden kingdom that they had no idea existed, and, you know, the whole reason why everything was happening was because basically, and I like to think of this game as a collective journey for all the characters. You know, they're overcoming their sadness. And as a big fan of psychology, my favorite psychologist actually is Carl Jung. So Carl Jung, he had a theory that a lot of the conflict in the world is because people will not confront their shadow. So basically this means that a lot of conflict arises when people don't confront, you know, their darker sides. Maybe you have anger, hostility you're holding on to. And if you don't deal with that, it comes out in really just nasty ways. You know, you could use that theory to explain why wars happen.
Sure.
So I really like how that idea was kind of in Klonoa. And I don't think the creators consciously put that in there. Maybe it was just unconscious, but I think I think you can apply that theory there, and I think that's. I think a lot of the things that we see in media are reflections of ourselves, and I'm really drawn to media that I can, on the surface it seems like it's one thing, but on below the surface it's completely different. Like it opens up an entire world, basically. Yeah. But I'm sorry, I ramble.
Oh no, you're good. No, you say you don't think it's intentional. I don't think like they might not have been necessarily aware of like the exact kind of theory behind it. But I mean, you look at like, Ocarina of Time, like you do have like Shadow Link, even going back to like Zelda 2, like he was in Zelda 2 too. But that's definitely something that's just kind of used as like a cultural shorthand for a lot of media. So it's while it's not necessarily maybe directly linked with the theory of it, maybe it's still something that's kind of just pervasive through like cultural thought, right?
Yeah, exactly.
That Klonoa game that actually got that. Were you excited about the remake that came out for that one here recently?
Oh yeah, I played it twice already through the whole thing. It was awesome. I was so happy when I was watching Nintendo Direct, and I was like, another Direct where I'm going to be disappointed, and then that came on, and I was like, no way. I never thought that would see the light of day ever again, but yeah.
And you're the only one on the stream who knows what that is. I think it was like me with they were doing Discotek announcements at Otakon. Again, not sponsored by Discotek, by the way. To get clear. But they for like the convention panel they were doing, they announced their release of Tachigoichi Retsuden, which is a very obscure Mamoru Oshii film about people who scam fast food joints. It takes place in the same universe as Jinro. It's weird. But I remember seeing that and being like, holy fuck. And then I was the only one in the room of like over 100 people who knew what the hell it was.
Everyone just looks at you like, what the fuck's your problem?
What the fuck? Why are you so excited? This looks weird. Why do you know what this is? But yeah, it's always a good feeling when it's like something that you feel like you really like, but maybe it's like, it's a lot lesser known, and something gets announced for it. And it's like you are the singular one who is excited for it.
To be fair, I feel like Klonoa is a little bit more well known than Takuguichi.
Probably. Yeah, probably.
Like it is a cult kind of following, but just nobody knows who the fuck Takuguichi Retsuden is.
That's true. Like a total of like 3 people. You, me, and like Hazel. And I think that's it.
And I guess like all the people that watch that Hazel video they mention it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I feel like I definitely kind of connected with like Ocarina of Time on a similar level to that. Because like I remember growing up, like I was very kind of conscious of like the kind of fragility of like youth. So like I never like had that kind of same yes. I never had like that same experience of like, kids always like, oh, I wish I were older or whatever. I was always just kind of aware, like, oh yeah, it doesn't really get better.
It's all downhill.
It's all downhill from 7 years old. But
I'm kind of jealous because it was the opposite for me. It was like, oh, everything's gonna be amazing when I'm an adult. Nope, that was a lie.
That was a lie.
Well, my parents, specifically my mother, was very much like, oh no, you should want to grow up too fast because it's you'll miss being a kid. So I was always just trying to be aware of it. Like, oh, I should just take things a day at a time kind of thing. So like Ocarina of Time, when you had like Sheik talk, like lamenting the passage of time and growing up and stuff like that, that stuff kind of resonated with me as a kid, but it didn't really fully resonate with me until I was, much older as an adult, going back and looking at it and being like, oh shit, yeah, I can see where the limericks are kind of coming from now, right?
Yeah, totally.
And it's something that it's almost like augmented. I think we talked about this with Shades. We were talking about Ocarina of Time, but like it's augmented in this like nostalgia, right? Because now that you're looking at something that's like a property talking about nostalgia with nostalgia, it like feeds into each other.
It's a surreal experience for sure.
Yeah,
this all comes full circle, basically.
Basically, yeah. But I feel like that kind of experience for me is something that I always kind of gravitate toward with media. Like Ocarina of Time obviously is one. Like Pokemon is another one. I feel like Evangelion and Fully Cooley are both like that. Like those kind of things were.
Don't start with Evangelion. I'll sit here and talk about it for 3 hours.
Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
I mean, if you like it, I guess it's a good thing because I like it too.
Okay, there
a
you
lot.
go.
It's my second favorite anime behind Kodocha, so there you go.
Okay,
there
I
you
guess
go.
does it come back to like the psychology stuff then?
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
like Evangelion, it's like, yeah.
I mean, we could talk. I mean, that's my favorite anime, so I definitely have room to talk about Evangelion.
Okay, then we need to. If it's your favorite. I actually just finished watching it again with my husband, and he'd never seen it before, and he had this perception of it like it was going to be really stupid because he's like, oh, Shinji's a little bitch. I'm like, I know Shinji's like, he's kind of a little bitch, but everything around him is very fascinating. And so needless to say, my husband loved it too. So I was very happy about that. But yeah, I actually, like I said, I just finished rewatching it, and it was, it's one of those shows that like when you rewatch it, you notice something new. And I feel like that's going to happen every time you rewatch it, basically. But I could be wrong. But because I had only watched it twice so far. But yeah,
I'm definitely overdue for a rewatch as well. I specifically want to rewatch the original version that aired on television because I guess we have that somehow. There are some like slight differences, especially in like the later episodes, in terms of like things are like they look different essentially, and it's very interesting. I would like to see those changes and what they did differently between the television version and then like when they released it in like home media. But yeah, definitely need to rewatch it. Like, I don't know, for me it's been since 7 years now. Long overdue.
I might even be longer than that actually, honestly. It was very much, Evangelion was very much like Ocarina of Time for me, where like I used to watch it once a year. So I've probably rewatched it like 8 times. But once I kind of got more into anime specifically, because that was from when I was like, like 11 to 20 or so, that kind of age range. Once I started getting back into anime, I feel bad going back and rewatching stuff I've already seen, because I'm like, man, I could be watching something that will be my new favorite, right? Like I could be experiencing something new. And so I kind of feel guilty going back and rewatching something. So I haven't gone back.
Feeling. Yeah.
I haven't gone back and rewatched Evangelion since, gosh, I should have rewatched it in 2015. I really wanted to, because that's the year that it takes place. So it's like, that's kind of the year you're supposed to. I did watch End of Eva that year. I watched it on the day it happened in the show. But I didn't rewatch the series. I should have. But I used to be very active online in Eva threads. If you've ever seen like those threads that are like, what the fuck did I just watch? I was one of the people in those threads that were like, well, what you just watched?
You're just like explaining what the hell they just. I guess this begs the question then. Have you seen the rebuilds? And if so, what are your thoughts on them? I
haven't yet. I'm actually a new fan to Evangelion.
Okay.
I will say that I actually, I've been a fan for anime for over 10 years, but I kind of fell off, when I started doing music and then I went to college. So like, I'm kind of just I feel like I'm catching up on a lot of things that I missed as a teen. So Evangelion I watched 2 years ago for the first time. So I haven't seen the rebuilds yet. Are they on any streaming services? I
like
actually don't know where I can watch them.
I don't know. I think they're on the 4th one, and therefore the other 3 should be on Amazon Prime. Let me check that.
But yeah, I feel like it should be on like streaming platforms. Wouldn't it like a Funimation dub? So shouldn't it be on?
Yeah. So yeah, all 4 movies are on Amazon Prime.
Okay.
So what are the rebuilds? Are they are they just retelling the original story, or are they like alternate universe things? I actually don't know.
We don't
know.
know.
It's very complicated.
Okay.
So the first movie is a retelling of the events, but there's like kind of hints here and there that it could potentially be a sequel. Mainly the main hint that you'll notice in the first like opening shots is the water is all red. So the shot,
And
just
there's,
imagine the first episode of Evangelion, but the water is red, and that's
Yeah.
kind of what you're getting with the first episode of
And
the
there's,
first movie.
blood on the moon, isn't there?
There is blood on the moon, yeah.
Yeah.
So it's like this probably a sequel, but it's an interesting one because I feel like people who enjoy the rebuilds kind of fall into two camps. You get those who kind of enjoy the rebuilds on more of like a surface level, and they typically like the first two, but not necessarily the third. And I don't know about the fourth one. I feel like the reception's kind of mixed on the last one. They like the first two because the tone of it seems a bit different. They kind of. I remember the kind of explanation for it at the time is like, oh, Rebuild 2.0 is when Shinji finally mans the fuck up or whatever, you know, which I don't think is like actually true. Like, I feel like the events that cover in the Rebuild second movie aren't really all that different from the series. It's just a matter of like the presentation is slightly different. So they're like, oh, he mans up. It's all different now. It's like, not really, but okay. And then they kind of like fell off with the third one because the third one was doing a lot to kind of catch up to where it needed to be because there's not a lot of like plot exposition
the third one
stuff in the second one.
Can best be described as subverts your expectations.
I see.
But I feel like I enjoy the rebuilds on like a very meta level.
Same.
Because to me, it's like it's watching like this transparent kind of presentation of like the Hideaki Anno's like inner workings, right? Like you can kind of see like his rejection of the message he had in the original series, and like looking back and being like, oh, this makes me fucking cringe. I put this in a TV series. Like I got to fix this. And like basically, I feel like the main criticism I've heard of like the original Evangelion is it doesn't really give any answers. It's like it talks about these things and it's like, oh yeah, you just need to, you know, keep a stiff upper lip or whatever and things will get better. And it's like I understand that from like his perspective because it's like you're still kind of going through it, right? Like you realize you got to fix something and like you know what trajectory you're going in, but you don't necessarily know how to fix it. And so like you wouldn't be able to have that answer in your work if you yourself have not come with that answer. Well, I feel like the rebuilds are like him having that answer finally because of his life experiences and getting married and just his general, you know, growing up. But then you're going to have like that disconnect where like his answer is not going to be the same as everyone else's answer. And so it's like paradoxically become like people now criticize the new rebuilds because, well, they have an answer. It's not the answer they want. And it's not the answer that resonates with them as an individual. So now it's like, well, you had the one that gave you the open-ended answer. Now this is the one that gives you a direct answer. Like, I don't know. Like, it's interesting to me, but
yeah, definitely.
I can see the criticism.
Okay, yeah, I think it's rather than like a sequel in a sort of like narrative sense. I would say it makes sense to think of the Rebuild films as a sort of like meta sequel, like almost like a sequel on like a thematic level, more so than like just like a direct narrative level. So it's one because like people are like, oh, you don't need to watch the original series to watch the Rebuilds, and while you technically don't, I feel like it's one of those things where in order to really get it, you should probably you want to watch like the original series first, and then. So if you ever do check out the Rebuilds, I would say, try to think of them almost as like a reply email.
Okay. Gotcha. Well, if I ever check it out, I will definitely let you guys know like what I think about it because that sounds interesting at least. You know, maybe it's not because I kind of like the open-ended question and answer thing that they have at the end of the original. So I might not like it as much. I don't think I will, but it sounds entertaining. So I'll give it a chance.
I don't think Mumi and I definitely both prefer the original TV series, but I think we definitely both at least appreciate the rebuilds, even if we, I think we both also have like a fair number of problems with the movies as well.
Yeah,
especially the third one.
I think they're good. My criticism of the third one kind of stem more from the second one, because I feel like the third one was put in a position where it couldn't really succeed because it's like it's now having to pivot and shift focus, and they didn't really do much of anything in the second one to be able to support that pivot. Like a lot of people criticize, like, well, Masato has no character in 3.0, and I'm like, she didn't really have a character in 2.0. Like, you're augmenting your experience with the rebuilds with that of the TV series. That's why you don't really have a problem with her character in the second movie. But the most characterization she gets is like her backstory, which is told by Kaji to the characters when she's not even there, and is shown to you in like a 2-second like flashback sequence. Like, she is the same character, but she's not. And if you watch it on its own, you don't really have that characterization that you do in the original series. So it's like criticizing 3.0
relationship that we have with these movies. It's a very love-hate sort of thing.
But at the same time, I get it. I get the criticism, but it's like, bruh, come on, just tone it back.
We will eventually, like I said, we've been saying this since episode 2 of this podcast. We will eventually just do an episode on the rebuilds. May God have mercy upon us.
Jeez. That would be, I feel like that's like the first like 4-hour episode.
Yep.
Which brings us to a word from our sponsor, Tokyo Treat.
Are you okay, dude? You're doing the annoying voice, but it doesn't sound right. You okay? Everything going on all right?
Yeah, I don't know. I've been feeling a little under the weather a little bit. Let me just get a drink for this water real quick.
Yeah, take another drink. Sucks you're not feeling too well because we don't have health care, so we can't afford to go see a doctor. But I know the next best alternative.
What?
That's right. You don't need to poison your podcast co-host to get a little taste of Japan this holiday season.
What?
Shut up. I'm doing the ad read, all right? Tokyo Treat is a monthly pop Japanese subscription box where you get up to 20 exclusive limited edition and seasonal flavored Japanese stacks that are only available in Japan for a limited time.
That sounds like a killer deal.
It's actually not that killer. It's actually going to save your life, thankfully.
What?
Now, this month's theme is the Snacktacular Christmas, all right? Christmas in Japan is one of the happiest and yummiest times of the year. Tokyo Treat is thrilled to bring you a taste of the amazing holiday flavors through their Snacktacular Christmas. Isn't the holiday cheer curing you already, Mumi?
In Christmas, the time of year you're most likely to be murdered. God.
No. You're thinking of DUI murder rates. Thankfully, both of our licenses have been revoked and we no longer own a car. But there's no reason to go outside this Christmas anyway, because this special edition Tokyo Treat box is full of favorite snacks, stamped with Santa's approval, like Kit Kat Strawberry Chocolate Cake, Christmas Kokoto Donut, Christmas Cake Gummies, Christmas Crunch Mix, and many more.
When I stop coughing, can I have one?
There's like blood in your cough now, too. Oh my god, yeah, here, take some of this.
What is this?
It's a booklet, and it contains a wealth of information about Japanese culture, as well as the snacks you receive, including allergen information, which you should definitely read that part. We don't want to make you any worse.
I can't eat this.
Here, maybe try some of this.
Oh, this is a marshmallow. I don't know how to help my throat, but they're good.
Good, yeah.
What else is in here? Oh, good. Comes with cow piss. I could get this thing on my foot with this.
No, drink that. That one's mine. Glug. Here, keep drinking. You need to drink more water. You need to keep your fluids up, all right? Drink some more water.
What is this, hair of the dog?
And don't forget to use the code Weeb Crew on Tokyo Tree website to get $5 off your first box.
What did you put in my drink?
Oh, I just put a fly in your drink.
Oh, ew.
Anyway, but let's get back to the episode.
I guess do you feel like you gravitate more toward series from like the 90s, I guess? Because like Kodocha and like even though you watched them more relatively recently, those are both kind of from that same time period. Do you think that your favorites are generally in line with that, or are they kind of just the happenstance?
I mean, if I'm being honest, when it comes to what I like in anime and manga, I'm all over the place. But I seem to, when I do watch the series from the 90s, they stick with me more than other ones. I don't know why. I can't really tell you why. It just is what it is.
And a lot of times they're like longer, so you're just kind of stuck with them more.
It might be that. I would say I do prefer the art style. They always seem more detailed. I just like I like the polished look of a lot of series today, but I don't know. I prefer series that have more cartoony moments in them, and
more, like again Kodocha,
just more, I guess, exaggeration.
Karikano, I guess, would be another really good example of that as well.
That's
Karikano
a good
gets
series.
super cartoony and exaggerated.
And it starts by Hideaki Anno for part of it. So there you go.
Part of it, all of it.
No, didn't he stop doing it like in... didn't they stop having him on it like by episode 20, and then it like went downhill or something?
I think we talked about this. Was it with Jaden?
Jaden, Gil, leave a comment explaining this to us again, because we can never remember who the hell directed. Because everyone says Hideaki Anno leaves halfway through, but he doesn't. Instead, he just starts spelling his name using like katakana as like some sort of weird form of like protest regarding TV regulations at the time. And I'm like, okay, so that's how that myth gets started. But maybe he does leave the production towards the end. I don't know, because the anime, from what I understand, I haven't seen it. It just ends also like partway through an arc, kind of unsatisfyingly. I don't know. Gil, leave a comment.
Gil, Steve'em got that short.
Jaden.
Yeah.
I watched that anime up until I think it was like episode 18, 19, or 20, and it was one of those three. And I stopped watching it at that point because everything that I read online was like everything after those episodes sucks, and this particular episode that I mentioned that I stopped watching it at is a better ending than the actual ending. So I was like, okay, I'll just stop watching, and then I didn't watch.
Did you at least watch like the popsicle stick episode?
I don't remember that. What's so special about that episode? Or do I not want to know?
No, the characters are just like on like paper cutouts on popsicle sticks. I think it's wasn't it directed by Imaishi, director of like Gurren Lagann and Kill la Kill?
Maybe him or Tsurumaki.
I'm
really bad with names.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember there was a lot of moments in that show where like the characters would be drawn in unconventional ways. So I might have seen that. If I did, I blocked it out because I don't really remember it, but it does sound familiar. It was a good series. But yeah, up until that point, after like episode 20, I don't know what happens. So I can't tell. I know they didn't finish the manga, and that's why a lot of people were upset by it.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. A lot of people are upset it takes deviations from the manga. And I guess we can tie this back into Kodocha, is that, well, Kodocha also, like, the anime takes fairly noticeable deviations from the manga as well, adding in like entire arcs, which are fairly controversial to say the least. Like the arc with Kodocha's dad, and then not Kodocha.
Sana.
I always call Sana Kodocha. The arc with Sana's dad, and then the New York City arc.
Oh,
the two big ones.
Yeah, the one with her dad is probably the worst because of like some of the implications of that one is weird. I don't want to go into it, but moving on. The New York, I don't hate it. but it's a bit long. Like, I feel like if it was only like 5 episodes, then it would have been better. But they made it like a pretty good chunk of season 2, and it's too much. It's very overwhelming. And then, like, you know, there's only that focus on Sana and the other love interest in the series, Naozumi. And then you never really see what's going on back in Japan, and it's just really annoying.
Especially given, and it does not get off on a strong foot, because it like cuts you off right at like as like this drama is building up between Sana and Akito, and then it's like, all right, yep, now we're off to New York City, and it's like, what? Address this? What? Cue like however many episodes later, it's like, okay, now we can come back to it, and it's like, yeah, very. I like the art, this like stuff that happens in New York City overall, but it's very, it kind of starts off on the wrong foot.
I agree. Its placement in the series is extremely jarring. It probably would have worked better if it happened at some point in season 1, because there was like that stretch of filler for a while. Like, I think it's like between like episode 20 something and then like 38, I think. And if like they would have maybe put it around there somewhere, like, oh, we're gonna go on a trip to New York to be on Broadway, and you know, it was just kind of a filler thing, and it didn't have all that drama around it. It definitely would have worked better.
I feel like I didn't like the New York arc, like it was like fine, but it was just like, I don't know, it definitely negatively impacted my view of the show as a whole.
Yeah, I think that's like where you kind of really started to get frustrated with the series. And even I did to an extent, but it's like, at least for me, because I really like Kodocha, and for me, like, there are parts of the series, you know, certain arcs, maybe certain episodes or characters that I'm not a big fan of, but overall, as a complete package, because again, this is a fairly like long show, like 104 episodes. As an overall package, I think I really, really like it. It's I would compare it to like Hunter x Hunter in a sense, where it's like the sort of collective whole is sort of elevates its like individual parts for me.
Sure,
I agree with that.
It's definitely a lot stronger, kind of like at the beginning when it's like able to kind of really hone in on its like the strengths of its writing. You know, with like Sana and like Akito's like characterization, blending in like the juxtaposition of like this hyperactive, like frenetic ADHD kind of presentation of like
bouncing
Sana
off the walls.
Yeah, with like the juxtaposition with these like really kind of dark like elements of like growing up and like dealing with loss and all this kind of stuff. Like when it's able to like really focus and hone in on that, it's really, really good. But when it's like kind of diluted a bit, you kind of, because like the New York arc, I felt like didn't even really have as much of like what I enjoyed about like Sana as a character. Like it wasn't that it was completely absent. It was just like so diluted that it's almost like its own show where it's just like, what am I watching right now? Because it's like just not there. It's not as the first half, like with the dub actually covers is so good. And then even like part like up to the New York arc is like still good. It's just, I don't know.
And then when you go out to the New York, I'm trying to remember what episodes, like how much is even after the New York City arc?
It's only like a core, I think. It's like 12 episodes, maybe 15.
I think it's about 20 episodes after that of the rest of the series. It's like mixed canon, and then there's like a whole stretch of filler, and then there's more mixed canon that ends the series, which is kind of weird, you know, if you've read the manga and you know like what actually happens, because they have the whole karate club at the end. That doesn't happen in the manga, but there's a situation very similar that happens, and it's like they really watered it down for TV, and it's really disappointing. It's not bad.
Would you say that you prefer the manga?
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. I was going to say it's interesting too, because it's directed by Akitaro Daiichi, and he does that a lot. Like that was a similar thing with like the original Fruits Basket anime as well, where it takes a lot of liberties from the source material and like some of those changes and deviations. I haven't seen the original Fruits Basket, but from what I understand, it also is like fairly controversial with the original content it introduces.
To a degree, I feel like a lot of the original content is just mainly at the end. I think he just wanted to wrap it up as like its own thing. where if they didn't get a second season, like it would still be able to be consumed and not just have that thing looming over it where you're like, well, what the fuck happened after that?
Yeah.
I think that's kind of where the controversy comes in. I don't feel like it added a whole lot like before episode 20 or so. I think it was pretty standard before that.
Okay.
What would you say?
Well, I was going to say, what I'm trying to say is it's time for a remake of Kodocha that's now completely faithful to the manga.
I agree, 100%. As long as they keep in like the really goofy, off the wall stuff, because
yes,
it's that humor is in the manga. It's just toned down a bit. But I hope that when they do, I feel like a Kodocha reboot is inevitable. Will it happen? Maybe I'm being too optimistic, but will it happen? I don't know. I hope
Kodocha
so.
Brotherhood.
Yes. Kodocha Sisterhood.
Sisterhood. There we go.
I feel like the OVA didn't have a lot of the comedic stuff in it, did it?
No,
not really. No. It's all right, but it's I don't know. I don't know how to explain it. It's definitely not as funny. It has its moments, but
it's one of those things where it's like, well, do you include Babbit?
Yeah, I don't know. Like, that's kind of one of the things I've talked about on my podcast, is like, if they did reboot it and, you want to keep that humor in there, would you include Babbit? And
would you include Babbit? Because I feel like Babbit's really the key to all of this. Because he's a funnier character than we've ever had before.
I think I'd make him like have cameos if it were me, but I think modern anime fans would like see Babbit and be like, "What is this?"
Very confused. Yeah, that definitely feels like a very like remnant of like 90s anime. Like that kind of like mascot character isn't really something you see much in a lot of anime nowadays. Maybe I guess the closest would be like Pochita from Chainsaw Man, but he's barely in it, so it's like
It's interesting that like the OVA was so devoid of the personality that the Daichi adaptation would end up having. Because it always makes me think of like all the 90s shoujo OVAs, right? Like Handsome Girl, Pops, sequence singles, A Girl, stuff like that. Like they only have like one episode, and I always think like, what are they removing? And like, how different is this from like the source material?
It's like, what if any of those got like 100 episode long adaptation? What would that look like?
Yeah, it is interesting.
Would they be one of my favorite anime? Possibly.
It's interesting looking at that time period because like it feels like so much of like shoujo that was adapted was just stuff that was aimed at kids. Like because with the wake of like Sailor Moon, right? You got like Wedding Peach and Nurse Angel Ririka and Cardcaptor Sakura, obviously. A lot of what was coming out was like it felt like a response to the popularity of Sailor Moon. Whereas it doesn't feel like you get quite as much like shoujo romance. I mean, you got like
stuff that's aimed more towards like young women, maybe like teenagers, women in their 20s.
Yeah,
like you get like OVAs basically.
You got like Marmalade Boy and Boys Over Flowers, Gokinjo Monogatari and stuff, and then obviously like Onisama A and Karikano. But it feels like a lot of what was coming out were just like the one episode OVAs. Like
Marmalade Boy was so disappointing. I don't know if you all have seen it, but I can't stand it.
I haven't seen it, but what I've heard is people just hate the ending essentially.
Yeah, like, I couldn't make it to the end. I'm not one of those people that like forces myself to sit through things that I don't enjoy. I can't do it. Like I physically can't.
That's a healthy watching habit.
Yeah, I guess. Like I feel bad because I feel like if I'm gonna talk about anime on Twitter with people, like I want to at least know what I'm talking about. But it's whatever. That's a topic for another day. But Marmalade Boy was like really disappointing because I watched Kodocha and I went into Marmalade Boy and I was like, oh, it's got, kind of the same vibe. Like even the characters look very similar. And it was just nonstop teen drama. And, I hate this word, but it was very like, it had a lot of really like actual problematic stuff in it. Like, there's this whole subplot with one of the main character's friends dating the teacher. And they end up together. Spoiler alert, they end up together, and like it's like something that like the writers were proud of, and I'm like, really? That's what we're gonna like make as our side plot, side romance? This is so annoying and gross.
Yeah, you get that in like Clamp stuff too, because I know Clamp, their view on love is like it transcends physical, spatial, time kind of boundaries, shit like that, which
it's a cool idea. Not like that.
It's admirable in concept. In execution, when you have like Sakura's childhood friend in elementary school with a crush on her teacher that is somewhat reciprocated, you're like, this is getting a little hot under the collar. I need to. Yeah. But what would you? I guess did you do a lot of research into like the Kodocha OVA? Like, do you know kind of what the thought process? I haven't actually. There's something I kind of came up with while I was doing research for show notes and stuff. Did you? I don't know if you actually looked into like why they made the OVA first as like a pilot, because it's not like that's unheard of, right? Like I know Ashino Joe, which is a big property, like manga property, had an OVA that kind of acted as its pilot. But you saw that a lot with a lot of shoujo properties in the 90s. So I'm wondering if like they just didn't have a lot of confidence in like shoujo aimed more toward like older audiences. And so that's why we got so many one-off OVAs. And maybe Kodocha was going to be like the same kind of thing, and then it ended up being kind of successful. So they went ahead and greenlit a TV series, or like, I don't know if you actually researched into like that kind of thing behind it.
No, I haven't. But I always assumed that it probably was like a test episode because
like
it came out
basically
before the series. It came out in 95. But other than that, like my research is very limited to like, the casting. And actually a fun fact about the OVA, the song that plays at the end was actually written by the mangaka of Kodocha. Like she actually wrote the lyrics for the song.
Oh, nice. I didn't know that.
Yeah, I think we watched the OVA after the TV series.
Yeah.
And we were very caught off guard. Yeah, by just how like Sana is blonde. And I'm like, I don't know how to process that.
Why?
Yeah, I think I was literally at one point, like when she's like first introduced, I'm like, is that the same character?
It's funny that we're talking about this because I actually, I collect a lot of Kodocha merchandise and DVDs and media and all that. And I'd been waiting to get my hands on the VHS tape itself. And it's always like really hard to find, or it's like too pricey for what I want to pay for it. But I actually am holding it in my hands right now, and I got it like 2 days ago in the mail.
Oh, hell yeah.
Nice.
So eventually I planned on getting like a VCR thing to hook up to my computer and see if like there's any additional content on it. But it's really nice. I posted some pictures of it on my Twitter page, and it came in really good condition. Like you would think it was made today. It doesn't look like it's from 1995. It's really nice, but it has like a little booklet inside that has more information. I haven't translated it yet, though.
Yeah, it's surprising how well kept a lot of stuff in Japan actually is. Like, they have like when I went to Japan, I bought a bunch of like anime vinyls, and they're from Galaxy Express and Ashino Joe and Macross, so that would put them close to 40 years old. But they're like in pristine condition. They still come with like the original like Obi kind of promotional ribbon they put on there. They come in the original like plastic. There's not any of the bent corners. There's no dust on them, and it's just like such like a weird juxtaposition to like doing kind of crate diving in like America, where like you'll buy an Elvis vinyl and it's like there's tons of
falling
dust
apart at the seams.
You can't hardly open it without the flat falling over. This sounds like crap.
Yeah.
Like I feel like people have this perception that vinyls all sound really bad because they're old and it's a what's the term? Archaic kind of like platform, like media platform thing. In reality, that's not the case. Like, it's just everyone's vinyls are in such terrible condition. And then it's just weird buying them used like there. And then, like, I didn't have to like clean them or anything. They're just already in like perfect condition. I'm like, damn.
Like even like laser discs. Like I have like a like mint, like the plastic is like still on Laserdisc copy of Pat Labor 2. And it's like, what the hell? Why does this exist? Why did no one ever open this?
Yeah, you get that much more than here where you'll go buy like a Pokemon card. I mean, that's why all of our secondhand market stuff is so much more expensive, I feel like, because people just didn't generally keep as good a condition of their stuff than they do, I guess, over there. It is nice though when you're importing stuff and you don't have to worry about it being just complete shit condition.
even when like you get something off like Bai, for example, and it's like, oh, it's not, it's like, there's slight wear and it's like the corner is slightly dented and it's like,
you get
that's
a magnifying glass, you're like, oh, there it is.
Like, there it is. Oh, literally would not have noticed that unless you pointed it out to me, but thank you for pointing it out.
Thanks for discounting it for it.
Yeah.
What would you say if you had like a top 5, top 10 anime, what would you say your favorites were? You had Kodocha and Ava.
Yes, so those would definitely be my top 2. Probably underneath those, I don't really have a particular order because it constantly changes.
Sure.
Let me see. One of my favorites, one of my other favorites, definitely my top 5, would be Shugo Chara.
Oh yeah.
Have you all seen it?
I've started watching it. I'm like close to halfway through the first season. Like I really enjoy it. I don't know. I'm really bad at watching anime these days.
Same. I watched the first episode and I was like, I love these character designs.
The character designs are great.
Yeah, and then I've not seen anything else of it because I'm really bad at picking stuff. Really, I think, and you've talked about this, is like I'm really bad at watching stuff outside of group watches nowadays. Like having to sit down and watch things of my own volition requires an exponential amount of willpower. Whereas if I'm watching with someone else, it's like, okay, now never mind. I'm just like locked in. Might as well do it.
Yeah, for me, I really enjoy Shugo Chara because like I really get into magical girls on like that the subtextual kind of thematic level where I'm always thinking about like how it's incorporating these themes of like growing up and stuff, because like I like drawing that kind of through line through like holy shit, I'm gonna blink on the name, Creamy Mommy or Minky Momo to like Madoka and stuff like that. That's why Madoka is like my second favorite anime, similar to like Evangelion, because like I like seeing those kind of threads and like seeing that lineage and seeing kind of how it's progressed as like that kind of like question and answer. Shugo Chara is really interesting to me because it's like the whole theme of like plugging in different possibilities for yourself in like such a kind of blatant way, where she's like, oh, she's got like the sporty kind of possibility or the home ec sort of one, and it's just very much like exploring these potential like best versions of yourself that it's really interesting on that like thematic level.
Yeah, I totally agree. Like it's probably my favorite magical girl anime, just because I like the theme behind it. It's not just, I'm going to transform into this particular animal human character or like in Sailor Moon, they have the planets. It's a very unique concept for a magical girl anime, and I really like how their transformations play into their personalities and just their development overall. Like, you said that you haven't gotten to season 2 yet, correct?
Not yet, no.
Okay, have you met Rima?
Rima, is she one of the student council people?
She becomes one. She has the blonde hair. She's really short.
I don't think I have yet. I don't think I've
Okay.
gotten that far.
She's got one of my favorite developments in the whole series, so definitely something to look forward to later in the series with her, because her Chara is, this isn't really a spoiler, but her Chara is basically like really goofy. She's kind of like a clown type character, but Rima's like very like stoic and reserved. And then I like how her home life and how she's expected to present herself kind of plays into her desire to kind of be goofy, and that how her Chara represents that. So you're definitely in for a treat in the later seasons, because for me, Shugo Chara definitely is one of those series that it starts out good, and then like it peaks in like season 2, but then like it kind of goes a bit downhill in the later seasons. But luckily the manga makes up for that. If you're ever interested in reading that, it's really good. Which, by the way, I heard that they're making a sequel to that soon. I don't know when it comes out. I think it comes out next year at some point, but I'm really looking forward to that.
I'll have to watch all of it to catch up to be able to watch that. Then I don't know, maybe make a video or something. Maybe.
We still got to make a video on Kimagari Orange Road, so God help us.
Yeah, we do. Yeah, that almost sounds like that other girl who's like in the student council, that her Chara is like a baby or whatever. And she's supposed to be like the kind of more graceful. She's in ballet and stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
Kind of sounds like that, which I don't know. I really like the dynamics of the Charas and like them, and especially like Ami as a character. Like she kind of almost, I think it was Danny from Anime Summit who kind of put it best. I think that was like, she's like an Ayazawa character, like from like Nana or like Paradise Kiss or something, put into like a magical girl like shoujo show.
I could totally see that. Yeah.
She's like such a great character. But yeah, so that's 3.
So you mentioned Madoka. That's one of my favorites as well, for very similar reasons. I like how it's a very unique take on magical girl anime. It's very dark and psychological, and I love it. And I haven't seen it in a while, though. I first watched it, I think, in 2018. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was the perfect length, too. Like, it wasn't too long. There was no moment that felt fillery. It had a story, and it told the story, and everything to me was building on that story and made it very compelling to watch all the way through.
Yeah, Madoka, I feel like, is one of those that gets like unfairly criticized sometimes, which I get that it's coming from like it's just massive popularity. But I feel like the criticism comes from like people that they're just like, oh, well, Madoka, it's not like revolutionary. Like, I mean, Lyrical Nanoha and Princess Tutu already exist. Like, it's not doing anything new or whatever. But it's like, it's not really like fair to the show. like, yeah, those exist. They're not necessarily doing the same thing. Like, I guess you could just say they're like quote unquote dark magical girls or whatever. But I feel like what Madoka is kind of going for specifically is it's almost like a response to something like Sailor Moon or like a Precure. Whereas I feel like Nanoha and Princess Tutu are a little bit more like removed from that kind of lineage. Like Princess Tutu is almost more of like a straight fantasy show as far as like its presentation. Like it is a magical girl show, but it's not like in that same kind of sphere as like a tokusatsu magical girl show. So like the interesting thing about like Madoka is how it's like criticizing this idea of like instilling this like message to young girls of like being able to fight good and evil and stuff like that. Because like you took it like Hime-chan's Ribbon and like stuff from before Sailor Moon, like a lot of those magical girl shows are just about growing up, right? They're just about teaching these kind of morals and lessons to young girls and kind of giving them, they very much kind of grew up alongside the women's liberation movement in Japan, where they were kind of showing kids like, hey, these are the potential futures you have. These are what you can be, like very much like a Shugo Chara. Like you had Miki Momo is like the prototypical example where she literally, I mean, she's like a singular character who's just like really ends up being really competent or whatever. But like it shows her being like a nurse or a veterinarian or an actress or a tennis player, you know, like it shows like her being able to do these different things. And it's very empowering in that sense. Mm-hmm. Whereas when you get into like Hime-chan's Ribbon, like it's about her using her ability like to gain a greater appreciation for other people's perspectives because she's turning into other people. And then Sailor Moon kind of takes that concept and turns it into like the tokusatsu kind of influence. Whereas I think you get kind of a response to that almost immediately with Doremi. It's like within 5-10 years or whatever, where Doremi kind of has that same kind of setup initially, but it's also kind of very much like there's this progression where they kind of move away from the magic because the way that they're using it to solve problems is not necessarily necessary. Like they can solve their problems without the magic. They're just using that as a way to facilitate problem solving. And then as they kind of grow up and mature, they're able to work through their problems in a way that's just more pragmatic. And so they don't need the magic anymore. And it shows them kind of slowly drift away from using the magic. And I think that's kind of what the message is supposed to be in a lot of those magical girl shows. But then like with Sailor Moon, obviously they're kind of having to fight against evil forces in a way. Granted, with something like Sailor Moon or Precure, they're often kind of tied into this kind of visual representation of like internal conflict, right? Like you think of like a Precure where a lot of the monsters are made by preying on like the doubts inside of people. But then like they're still kind of solving those problems in like a physical way, like they're beating up the monster or whatever. It's just like it's a visual representation of like overcoming these problems, but it still kind of has these interesting implications to it that I feel like Madoka is directly kind of criticizing. You talk about rambling earlier. This is like when you talk about Madoka Evangelion, like I very much can start.
I have to put up with this every single day.
Yeah, our podcasts are actually like 8 hours long. He has to cut like at least 7 hours of me rambling about Madoka Magica.
Unless you subscribe to the Patreon.
Subscribe to the Patreon. But yeah, I definitely vibe with like Madoka resonating on that level. But that's number 4.
Yes, and my 5th. I always feel like my lists surprise people because, like, I have a whole channel dedicated to a shoujo anime, so I feel like there might be like some expectations put on me that like I'm like a big shoujo fan, which I am.
It's like,
Go ahead.
I was gonna say people like expecting it's gonna be like all like shoujo deep cuts.
Yeah, but it's not, and I almost feel like I have to like apologize for that. But again, I do love shoujo, but I love a little bit of everything when it comes to anime and manga. So, there's not really any genre that I'm like, oh, I don't want to watch that. Like, I'm willing to try anything. But my 5th favorite anime would have to be Steins Gate.
I think that was Lex's favorite anime.
Yeah, that what he said? That's why we put it in the thumbnail, even though we only, I think we literally just said Steins Gate and then we moved on. So
I don't know, I think I definitely understand where you're coming from with the shoujo. People have this weird expectation, I feel like, of why is it frozen like this?
What's the matter?
I don't know. I mean, I'm recording on my end, so it's not a big deal, but people have like this weird like expectation because people associate me with being like a magical girl expert, right? Where it's like I'll get pinged when people are talking about magical girls, like, oh, explain this or like give me your take on this or something. So like people expect me to have like there's like this weird perception of like what your favorite should be. And they're like, oh, you got to have X amount of your favorite top 100 shows or whatever, had to be Magical Girls or whatever. But in reality, like, I feel like it translates where I'm a lot more forgiving toward Magical Girl shows as like them being my favorite, because I'm able to like get this kind of deeper appreciation for it on like a production level. But I don't necessarily think that translates where I have to have like all Magical Girl shows my favorites, right? Mm-hmm. So like I feel like I understand that from like the expectation of like, oh well, you make shoujo content, so all your favorites have to be shoujo, right? It's like, well, no, I mean, I can like other things. Like I can have this kind of deeper appreciation for this one thing while still simultaneously being able to recognize like, you know, maybe they're not as good as these other things are that aren't necessarily in this sphere that I enjoy more, right?
Yeah, I totally get that, because as a YouTuber, I feel like I'm like, if I do any videos that aren't related to Kodocha, I feel that like I'm obligated almost to make videos about shoujo anime and manga, and it sucks because like I do, you know, I want to make content on, you know, shoujo manga that I enjoy, and I have, but I feel like the things that I'm really passionate about, I feel like the people who are subscribed to my channel would not give two shits about. Like, you know, I could go on and on about Zelda, but I know there's a lot of Zelda content on YouTube, so that's why I haven't really, you know, I've only made one video, and I tried to make it more personal when it came to that topic. And that's kind of where I'm at with like Evangelion as well. Like I want to make an Evangelion video, but I might make it kind of like the Zelda one that I did, like a little bit more personal. But, you know, I'd like to talk more about, you know, different series that aren't shoujo on my channel. And it's almost like I have ideas and I write them down, and I'm like, I just think to myself, like, no one would want to watch this. Like, I feel like the people that are subscribed are expecting a certain kind of video from me, and this isn't it. And it's just a really frustrating thing to have to kind of worry about, when in reality, it's like, just fucking post the damn video and don't worry about that. Like, it just, you know, if you're passionate about it, people will see that. But, you know, I still struggle with it a lot.
So that seems to be like a common thread that comes up since we've basically only had YouTubers on, and that's something that always seems to be weighing on people's minds, is like, well, there are things that I want to talk about, but I'm unsure whether or not our audience wants to hear about it as well. And I think, yeah, to a certain extent, it's one of those things where it's like, you just kind of have to bite the bullet and, you know, talk about what you want to talk about at the end of the day, because it is your channel at the end of the day, and, you know, maybe not everyone wants to hear it, but I think there are certainly people out there who will. And I think like I think philosophy when it comes to content creation is that, you know, this stuff that we're making is going to be around longer than we are. So yeah, it should be good. And, you know, you want, you know, you don't want to be in a situation where, you know, you're just putting stuff out. You want, you know, we want to be, at least, you know, be proud of everything that we've essentially put out. We don't want, there's like a good quote. It's like, you know, we don't want our debt to posterity to be paid in crap, essentially.
Totally.
I mean, you talked about it when you talked about why you started your channel and like how you wanted that content to exist. I feel like a lot of the people that we talk to, like that's kind of like the reason they start making content, like especially like, you know, us. I mean, we can speak for ourselves. Like, yeah, we wanted, specifically, I wanted like there to be like, I always wondered why there wasn't like a red letter media type of content for anime where people just kind of knew what they were talking about, but it wasn't like have to be in this structured way. Like it could just be like a little bit more laid back, and, you know, you could just tell that there was like some kind of knowledge behind it without it having to be like formal, right? So it's like, I always wondered why there wasn't that kind of why that kind of content didn't exist. And so that's why we started this channel. And then why I started making content to begin with was like, you know, I've talked about this a number of times, like watching Haruhi Suzumiya for the second time and like having a different perspective on it than I did originally, I was like, man, this is interesting. And like I went and looked and nobody really talked about it in a sufficient way. And so I was just like, well, fuck, I need to go do it myself. And so it's all just about like producing the kind of content you want to see. You want there to exist, right? Like it doesn't feel right just making content for like the sake of making content. It very much like you want to kind of add to the discourse and the conversation.
Exactly. Yeah.
So what would you say, what kind of shoujo do you like outside of like Kodocha, like 90s kind of stuff? Like have you read like, I don't know, Skip Beat, or have you watched Nana or whatever?
Those are on my list. It's funny because like I don't know what it is about me, but I'm just always like, I'm not going to watch the popular ones. I'm going to watch and read the ones that I just see and I'm like, that looks cool.
Absolutely.
So I do love Fruits Basket though. That's a good one. I really enjoyed that. It would probably be in my top shoujo that I like. I really like Tokyo Mew Mew. That's a magical girl show. That was one of the first magical girl shows I got into outside of Sailor Moon, and I always enjoyed that. I also really like this manga series called Ultramaniac. It's actually by the same mangaka who created Marmalade Boy. This series came after Marmalade Boy. This one's a lot better, in my opinion. It's about a girl who's she's a teenage witch, basically, and she flunks magical school, so she has to go to a regular school, and like she tries to do magic with her new best friend, and like of course, craziness ensues, and the romance in it is really good too, and all the characters were fun to read about, and it's a short series. It's only like 5 volumes long. And then the last series that I actually read and watched, I'm actually reading it now. I'm almost done with it, but I just watched the anime. It's called Full Moon. And that's, it's like kind of, I wouldn't call it a magical girl because she's just like one girl. But I don't know what you'd call that series, but like she transforms into basically an adult version of herself, and she goes and she sings, and she has cancer and she's about to die within, I think, a year. And that was a good show. The manga is definitely a different vibe though, which is interesting. I'm not sure which I prefer yet, but when I get to the end of the manga, I think I'll know which one that I like the best, because really it's about even at the moment.
Sure. Yeah, we actually talked about Full Moon with Ina a bit because she really liked that one too. I would definitely say that's a magical girl show. Like it's kind of like a love letter to the early magical girl shows from like Pierrot, like with Korean Mami being the first one of that kind of lineage, where they kind of just turn into an adult version of themselves, like this, just a singer. And they kind of had that like singing property where you had like, I think it was the voice actress for Korean Mami's like career, like music career, basically starts and ends with Korean Mami. Like she got really big because of that show. And then you had, there's this like lineage where it's like her, that, and Fancy Lala, and then Full Moon. So it's definitely a magical girl show. It's just not of that, like I said, the tokusatsu kind of lineage, like the Sailor Moon or Tokyo Mew Mew.
Yeah, I definitely felt like the whole magical girl element of it was kind of like, it's a big part of the show, but like for me, I felt it wasn't really the focal point of the show. Like the focal point was more about, her relationship with the other two characters, Takato and Moroko.
Sure, yeah.
And I felt like it was more about that than really her singing career. Like for me, like her singing career kind of takes a back seat with all the other stuff that's going on in that show. At least that's my opinion. Like I found that the other stuff to be a lot more compelling.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that I don't know. It'd be interesting to hear your opinion on the manga because, like, I feel like the anime with the music just added so much.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if it weren't for like Eternal Snow or Your Future, I think is another one. Like, without the tracks, I feel like it wouldn't have the same impact for me.
Mm-hmm.
So it'd be interesting to see which one he actually was like thought was better in terms of like execution in that regard.
Yeah, like the music is a nice addition, obviously, because she's a pop singer, so you gotta have that in your show,
Yeah.
to make it entertaining and add that layer. Since now that you can see them moving and hear it, as opposed to reading dialogue bubbles. But again, I always prefer, when I think it's obvious from this podcast today that I really like exploring characters and I guess their relationships and their inner thoughts and things like that. That's always the highlight of shows for me.
Yeah. So I guess we can then also like this the question of like why. So what specifically? I guess first I would preface the question of like when did you watch Kodocha? Like when in your kind of anime journey did you watch it where it had that kind of impact on you?
So I watched the series in 2016. So in during my life at that time, like I was kind of picking up the pieces of my life at that moment. Because I had just gotten over a really bad breakup from my first serious relationship that I had for about a year and a half.
Sure.
And I was not going to college at that point. I was still like deciding what I wanted to do. And I wasn't really happy with like where my music career was going. So I was just like, I just don't know if I want to do this anymore. So I found Kodocha at a time when I was just really like not sure where my life was going to go. So in a way, Kodocha came to me at a point where I needed it, I think. I just really needed the optimism of the character of Sana at that time. And I know it sounds a little silly, but like having that show to watch and look forward to and like seeing how Sana overcame her problems, like always with a smile on her face. And like she always tried to make the best of everything. Like it really helped me move on into the next stage of my life. And I think that's probably another reason it stuck with me so much, was because of that time that it came to me into my life. And again, like I didn't really start getting back into anime like fully until I started doing my channel and like started to, branch out to different social media platforms and like discover other series that I missed out on while I was in college. And it's just been really great. Like Kodocha, I feel like opened a lot of doors for me, which is kind of weird. It's this obscure little shoujo anime from the 90s. And, it definitely changed my life. It brought me a lot of new friends. It's introduced me to new shows that I wasn't paying attention to before because I was so focused on my studies, and I would definitely say I'm more of a gamer. So I was, I'm very interested in gaming. I'm always checking out the Nintendo Directs when they come and, seeing what's coming out on PlayStation. I like PlayStation as well. So, being more invested in that and just personal life didn't really give me the time to check out anime that I missed out on. So, starting my channel has definitely been a gateway for me to better things. And I'm really happy with the way things have been going in my life ever since I started my channel. And I'm really thankful to everyone who's been watching the videos that I've made and like the people who follow me on Twitter and see the posts that I make about Kodocha. And I'm really thankful that the community around this anime has come together in the last few years like it has, because it's been really fun to watch it grow like it has.
Yeah. I mean, you said you think it, like, oh, it might be silly, but I don't think it is at all, because it's like that's what a lot of media kind of comes from, right? Like, is reflecting, elements of people's lives kind of back at them to where it helps like process them, right? Where I think like you even have there's a show airing this season that is a magical girl show, which is why I'm aware of it. But it's it's a sequel to Yes Go Precure 5, which was like the first Precure season that they did like a team, like a 5 characters. And it's a sequel to that where they're like adults and like office workers and teachers and stuff like that. And it very much kind of feels like it's coming from that place where it's like, we had Precure for these, kids when they were younger, and they had this thing to kind of, help them process these tribulations and stuff they were going through life. But we don't really have that. I mean, we don't have a Precure for like adults, right? I mean, you have like different forms of media that do the same thing that aren't necessarily Precure, but like this is like acting as like those characters are now grown up and are now kind of showing you like the kind of evolution of like where they were, because like Precure is very idealistic. You get characters that are like, oh, well, we'll just solve all of our problems this way, and it's always the most optimistic way possible, which is great for kids, but it's not realistic, right? Like once you get into the real world, which is what the show's kind of tackling, you get into the real world and your problems aren't so black and white, right? Like you want to help somebody, but then like circumstance might prevent you from helping them in the most optimistic way, and there's not really this outlet for you to kind of like process this kind of stuff. So I definitely feel like that's not something that's just a few people have. It's not like, oh, well, this is silly that like I'm going through this problem in my life and this media is helping me with it. Like I feel like a lot of people kind of go through that, and it's good to kind of be able to recognize that and kind of build communities and appreciate them, right? Like not necessarily just share that experience on your own and just be like, oh yeah, well, I had this experience that helped me, but no one else ever was helped by the show or whatever. It's definitely a nice thing to see people being able to come together and bond over something like that.
Oh yeah, it's been so much fun because like I mean I feel like the community definitely has like really grown, because like I said, part of the reason I started my channel was because it just like seemed like there was just no content for Kodocha. Like there was no like blogs, no social media accounts, and I wanted to make videos because that's kind of where I knew to start. And like I said, I branched out to Twitter and Tumblr and TikTok and all those platforms. But when I said like I thought it felt silly, it was because like at the time I was like, I'm an adult woman and I'm like sitting here and like just really depressed, and I'm like a cartoon 12-year-old girl is like making my life so much better, and like I guess that's why it felt silly at the time. But sure. I totally get what you're saying. Is it's not silly. It's just like you kind of feel that way when you're at your lowest point, I guess.
Yeah. No, I get it. We got. I guess the recording is gonna stop us here in about what 20 seconds.
30 seconds.
30 seconds. We gotta think of a way to end this. Say something stupid.
Ah!
No. Screaming doesn't count.
Well, thanks for having me on the show. I really enjoyed the discussion. Yeah, I hope I get to come back, because I did have a lot of fun on the show.
Yeah, we'll definitely have to do this again. Yeah, because I feel like there's so much more we could talk about.
Talk about video games. Talk about Evangelion.
Talk about our sponsor, Tokyo Tree. This is recorded in post because we didn't have a good ending to the podcast. Anyway, check out our sponsor, Tokyo Treat, link in the description. Use the code Weeb Crew, get $5 off your latest box, and be sure to check out that Kodocha Girls channel. Thank you for listening. This is a really weird ending for a pod. We don't usually end podcasts like this. It usually just kind of like cuts off.